Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to kick off our sixth year of presenting amazing webinars by featuring two of the most interesting and smart people I've ever met, both of whom had such broad and diverse skills and experience. I promise you will leave here today smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones, and ask questions of our speakers. Also, this is very important for everyone, including you speakers. Please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not continue to do this for free. Special thanks to MedJet, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Tennessee Brew Works, and my favorite industry podcast, Unlimited Supply. A little note about MedJet. Guys, if you travel a lot, you should consider MedJet. This international medical transport and security response membership will get you home safely from wherever you are in the world. I joined, and you should too. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Matt Watts. Matt took an unconventional path from the tour bus to the boardroom, but his passion for storytelling and culture marketing has made it a winning formula. After a decade playing sold-out shows worldwide with his band, The Starting Line, Matt turned his expertise in building a global following into a career-leading marketing for iconic brands such as Vans, Fender, Amazon, and Hard Rock. A founding member and guitarist of The Starting Line, a punk mainstay for over 25 years with more than 1 million records sold, Matt brings a DIY ethos to brand building. His philosophy is to create movements, not just marketing plans. For 2 decades, he's helped brands stay relevant by blending creativity with commercial discipline, driving global brand strategy, digital acceleration, and creator-led storyteller that taps into youth culture and fuels growth. Whether launching a product drop, scaling D2C, or sparking cultural conversations, Matt connects brands to people, passion, and purpose, transforming marketing initiatives into movements that inspire community, loyalty, and lasting impact. Welcome, Matt. It is an honor to have you with us today.
Thanks, Tom. It's an honor to be here.
And joining today as our featured guest is Randy Nichols. Randy is an artist manager, entrepreneur, and music industry operator with over 20 years of experience spanning artist development, touring, digital strategy, and live events. He's managed artists including Under Oath, The Starting Line, Bayside, Say Anything, Sikaris, Aaron Gillespie, The Almost, and Vacationer, supporting careers that have earned gold records and Grammy nominations and generated tens of millions of dollars in touring and merchandise revenue. He's currently an artist manager at Fly South Music. Randy's a leading voice in ticketing reform and artist advocacy. He serves on the board of NITO, where he leads research and policy efforts focused on combating ticket scalping and strengthening consumer protections for brands and artists. His work has included engagement with state and federal lawmakers, regulators, and industry stakeholders. In addition to artist management, Randy has advised and helped scale influential music and commerce platforms, including Bands in Town and At Venue, the latter of which exited at a $200 million acquisition. He advises Propeller, which connects artists and fans to social impact campaigns through culture-driven engagement, Quantizer, an AI-powered live events operations platform, and FanFeed, a product uncovering the memory layer of live events. He teaches music business at Hofstra University, bringing real-world industry experience into the classroom to mentor the next generation of music professionals. It is my pleasure to welcome these two rock stars to our platform today. Take it away, boys.
Hey, thanks for having us, Tom. And Matt, good to catch up.
Yeah, I mean it's been a minute, so really looking forward to this one, Randy.
Yeah, are you looking at all the attendees in here? This is like it's like a show. We've got Pooh Bears in here even.
I didn't know Pooh Bear's in here, but that's awesome. I keep seeing names pop up, and there's so many familiar faces. Would love to reconnect with people afterwards if it's been a minute.
Yeah, same here. Like literally, for the people who don't know, Pooh Bear is this guy who would crowd surf at every starting line show in New Jersey, dressed as Pooh Bear for the last 20 plus years. So we've got people like that in the chat. Cooley Ranks, who was an artist that I managed before I managed you, Matt, who literally, I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but he's the guy who told me that I'm a band manager. And because he told me, I am a manager to this day. And anytime I see him, he gets a big smile on his face and he's like, I told you you're a manager. And he knew something that I didn't. So big shout out to Cooley.
That's so awesome. And then Randy, I mean it's been a minute since we caught up. So would love like just to take the top of this, just to like click back into how you got here, what you're up to now. I mean, I've known you for over 2 decades, but I think a lot of people in the chat probably don't know how you got your start or ended up doing the work that you're doing today. And like, would love to just to like click into some of that, how you got into music, the industry, and like how that early path like maybe shaped like what you're focused on now.
Yeah, so I'll go way back to college. And when I was in school, I had a handful of friends who were a couple of grades ahead of me who were working in the music industry. One of them, my friend Melissa Linsalato, was a college rep for Sony, and she didn't have a car, but she was a college rep on Long Island. So I started driving her around to all her accounts and all her events, and started going to shows in the early 90s, working for Sony. She was working with Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soul Asylum, Rage Against the Machine, like every band that was blowing up. So I would just show up with her to every event. And that was my real first intro. And by the way, Melissa has a great, she left and didn't spend much time in the business, but her first real job in the industry was working for Oasis, doing tour press for them on their first US tour ever.
That
And
had to be insane.
it was absolutely insane. And there's a classic interview. The only interview she missed the entire time was Stephanie Rains from Drive Through Records used to have a video show called Sideshow. And she interviewed one of the Gallaghers, I forget which one, and asked him if Simon LeBon sued him for stealing his hairstyle, which you can imagine how well that interview went. So I got my start through Melissa, and then another friend of mine in college, this guy Rob McDermott, who went on to manage Lincoln Park for 20 plus years. He was a couple of grades ahead of me. He kind of gave me a step into the industry. But fast forwarding a little bit, my last internship I had in the business was at a booking agency. And at that booking agency, the biggest act I had signed while I was there was a band called Real Big Fish, who I'm still friendly with them and their manager to this day. If I remember correctly, that was one of the first tours the starting line did, opening for them.
Yep, absolutely.
So was an agent for those guys. The agency kind of collapsed at one point, at which point I told my artist I was no longer an agent. And Cooley Ranks said, well, if you're not an agent, now you're the manager, and your first job is to find us an agent. And I stayed with them through the majority of their career. They did something similar to what you did with Starting Line, where they broke up and then got back together again. But I stayed with them through that whole intro part of their career. And little bit later in time, I was working for a couple of different companies trying to figure out what to do next. And Richard and Stephanie from Drive Through Records had approached me asking if I was interested in starting a management company with them. And I immediately told them no, I wasn't. And they came back to me again and again and again. And then 9/11 happened. And it was this moment in New York where looking for a job was nearly impossible. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I've liked Richard and Stephanie. They have their pros and cons, but like, I'm going to give this a shot and work with them. They asked me to start a management company, and you may have heard of the first band they asked me to co-manage together, band called The Starting Line, and that's pretty much right around when we met. But Matt, you should tell the story of how we first met.
Oh man. So like we had heard your name and then I mean we so the band got signed right as I was graduating college and I think like at that point in time that whole scene had not hit critical mass yet. So one of our first tours it was van and trailer pre-technology so maps and one Motel 6 hotel room a night if we could afford it and making like $100 a night on support tours. And it was the best thing ever. Like, I mean, we all loved every single second of it. But there was one night where we had a show on Long Island. And by the time we got into Long Island, it was like 11 a.m. and it was way too late to check into a hotel from the night before and way too early to check into a hotel that day. So we were all sleeping in the van and I was sleeping in the driver's seat with the sun just beating on me. Everyone else is like getting a good night's sleep in the back and I'm just trying my best to rest. And this guy just knocks on the side door, and I lower the window, and he's like, "Hey, my name's Randy. I'm friends with your label. If you guys want to sleep in my apartment, you're more than welcome." And us being sort of the trusting people that we are, we're like, "Okay, this doesn't seem weird at all." So ended up going into Randy's apartment, got a couple hours of sleep, got a shower, got fed and then struck up a rapport with Randy and became good friends. And from that, he ended up being our manager for well over 20 years, which was pretty wild.
Yeah, it really is. By the way, I have to give a shout out to Jillian Newman and Larry Weintraub, who are chatting in the chat, talking about the Randy Nichols Needs a Job newsletter. Because before I partnered with Richard and Stephanie from Drive Thru, I could not find a job. It was after 9/11. New York was in this weird moment. And I started what was something that ended up going viral accidentally, which was just a newsletter that I needed a job. And I would send an email every week to people being like, I'm sitting on the beach drinking margaritas right now, but I'd much rather be at a desk. And just these humorous, fun emails. And Larry is a brilliant marketer, as is Jillian. They still remember to this day when they see me, they're like, Randy Nichols needs a job. And it just, yeah, just a great memory.
Man, I love that. So that takes us to, where we met. Would love to like, get a read on like what you're up to now and then also like how that early path like shaped you and sort of your approach to things.
Yeah, so, came on co-managing you guys and, worked on Finch for a minute. And then the relationship with Richard and Stephanie at Drive Through didn't work out for terribly long in the co-management business, but we stayed friends to this day, took the company on my own, and a year or two later picked up Under Oath, handful of other artists. And in that time, I believe it was probably Matt was pushing me at one point in time that they believed I needed to be a part of a bigger management company to be a successful manager.
Our artists
And
aren't always right, so I will caveat that, but yeah.
yeah, funny side note to that story, 5 years later or whatever, 10 years later, Matt is working for me in my office at Red Light Management. And he's like, why are we here? And I'm like, you know who to blame for that. So it's just kind of funny how that happens. But in that time at Red Light, where, when the band broke up, fast forwarding a lot, band broke up for a couple of years or at least went on hiatus. Matt came and worked for me in my office and learned to be a manager, although he kind of was already anyway, managing the band with me, just as any, lead band member will do. But when we were at Red Light, we'd have these brilliant entrepreneurs who would come in and want to pitch Red Light Management on their various startups. And what I found is most of the managers really didn't care about them at all, first of all. And secondarily, they were brilliant. So I wanted to get to know them. And a handful of us would take these meetings with them and where most people in music are conditioned to tell everybody that they're great and everything they're doing is perfect. I've always taken the approach of being honest and pointing out what's wrong and flawed. So I was telling these startups everything they were doing wrong, which made them want to talk to me more. And as my time came to an end at Red Light and I left, I had all these relationships with founders and realized that I could start a business advising founders in a lot of the same way that I work with artists. So in that process, I announced my new company, put a shingle out saying that that's what I do. And weeks later, Bands in Town came to me to ask me to make an investment in the company and advise for them. And at that point in time, I had $30,000 in the bank and I made a $25,000 investment in Bands in Town because I believed in them that much. And that became the start of my, advisory side of my business.
Man, that's awesome. And it's jogging my memory about, moving to New York, working at Red Light with you. That was such an important time in my life because I remember, the band had been sort of full time for a decade, did really well, went through the major label ringer with numerous major labels. And I think we were just totally gassed. And I think like trying to figure out what the next move was. I had, graduated from college with a civil engineering degree. I knew I didn't want to do that. Um, but trying to figure out what that next step was, and you were like a mentor, a friend, and really sort of opened up a door to me in the world of artist management, where I didn't realize the skill set I was building at the time. And I think coming in, learning the complexities of it, and I joke around, like people ask me how my time in artist management was, because I was with you for a couple of years at Red Light, and then I went to AAM. But I'm like, yeah, it was all karma for the craziness I put Randy through. But like, in all honesty, I think that role as quote unquote, board of directors, or a CEO for a band's business, I think, instilled in me a lot of transferable skills that I didn't really realize at the time. And I think coming from those worlds of like punk and DIY and alternative music, I think there's such an interesting part of community building and how people prop each other up and learn from one another. One thing that I've always connected with you is your DIY and punk roots. And I think like would love to like hear from you, like, coming up in those worlds, like how did that instill some values in you, how you think about community, and do you think like people from those worlds operate differently, and how does that show up in your work today?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've found, over the last few years, I've realized this even more. Is our community, this kind of punk, emo, scene music, whatever you want to call it, everything we did, we never had enough money to get done what we wanted to do, but we were never going to let lack of dollars get in the way of it. So it really became both a fan community looking to prop you up and everyone in the community looking to support each other. Like just looking in this chat right now, there's so many people that I talk to who I've given advice to, who have given advice to me. And I feel like this scene, for whatever reason, is so much more inclusive and open. And the one thing I'll say though is there's one other music genre that parallels our scene that we came up in, and that's the jam band world. And I've found the longer I work in this industry that a disproportionate number of the successful executives in our business came from either the jam community or, our scene related community. And I think it's so important, you know, both in building a fan base, but in developing executives to have that community. Like I often say, Kevin Lyman, people talk about his legacy of breaking so many bands in the industry. He broke so many more than he gets credit for because he trained a generation of executives in the business who then went on to break other bands. And that's just something special about this community. And I think for myself, it's really helped me to look at how I present products that I work with now to bring them to the market. And I'd be curious to hear from you how you've brought that into what you're doing in your jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I didn't realize the skill set I was building was transferable necessarily. And early on, coming from those worlds, I think you look at your peers that are putting on shows at 16 years old and have to manage a P&L without realizing it's called a P&L, and do all these things, and you have support from your community. I think, definitely like instilled some rigor and discipline and just ability to figure it out. And I think like anytime I meet someone from, the punk, the emo, even the jam world, it's like you kind of know, and even skateboarding, right? That's another thing where like, okay, this person knows how to figure it out. Like they know how to fall down, get back up and push forward. So for me, it's really been tapping into sort of the core of, community and values and doing the right thing by people. And when presented with a problem, coming forward with a solution. And I remember early on working with you, like we were one of the first bands on social media. And I think like early adopters from a tech standpoint, thanks to you. But I think like being able to have your eyes open to these new pathways that create community, that drive culture, et cetera. Like I'm always now looking for those opportunities. So whether it was me being at Fender, where, I got to lead marketing for 6.5 years, with a really, really amazing team, and looking at artists as our core community. How do we engage them? How do we support them? How do we develop these sort of mutually beneficial relationships, knowing that we didn't have Nike money, but we can be there for them and be a partner? I think Vans is the same way of like knowing that core ethos of, yes, we're a subculture brand, but the strength lies in the sum of the parts. And I think, coming from those communities and that DIY world, like you realize the power of coming together and pulling in the same direction. So I think for me, like, growing up in those worlds, I think it's naturally become who I am and sort of aligns with my philosophy to everything I do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I touched on it quickly, but the early adoption piece, I would credit, the fact that the starting line is still able to do what we're able to do 26 or 27 years later, which blows my mind. But I think despite like going through the major label ringer, there's a lot of bands that didn't end up as fortunate as we did, but we were able to build a really potent and powerful fan base that is still stuck with us till today, that's still growing. You certainly had a huge role to play in terms of getting us on socials early and building those communities. Um, Looking back, like, how did you know that mattered early on? And then, like, what did people underestimate about that direct to fan connection back then, or what do they now?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing as to why it connected to me is it was something I was participating in. So it was important to me personally. So because it was important to me, I was engaging and I saw how it was affecting people. And we would meet people through that, like look at someone like that kid Guns, Mike Gunzelman, who I'm sure a bunch of people listening know. Like we met him when he was probably 15 years old and he just wanted to help bands. And you find these kids from that community who want to do more to help. So you can empower fans who want to help you through those channels. And like it's funny because I look at nowadays and you have all these record labels talking about, monetizing the super fan. And there's nothing that turns me off more than that term because what they're talking about is what we were doing 20 plus years ago. And it's what, Jillian and Larry who are in here are doing with Fanscape. It's
Hmm.
bridging the relationship with fan and audience. And it back then and still needs to be a two-way relationship. A huge part of that community back in the day, it was a couple of sites. It was purevolume.com, it was Absolute Punk, and MySpace. And if you just engaged in the earliest of days, you created this two-way relationship. And, it just worked. People wanted to be a part of those conversations. And by the way, funny little side note, I've probably told you this story, Matt, but I'm sure others haven't heard it. But before MySpace, even, I was using Friendster, and the Ben Jameson Parker was using Friendster as well, and we created a page for them. And by the way, Jameson was the model on the cover of the Starting Line's first full-length album, who then went on to have a bidding war between all the major labels where I had Leor Cohen and Jimmy Iovine chasing me daily to sign them. But we were sitting in Jimmy Iovine's office talking about signing the band, how we approach things. And we mentioned that we were using Friendster, and he said, "What the hell is Friendster?" And we explained it to him. He said, "Come over to my computer, show me this." And we literally got up, me, the band, and a guy named Courtney Holt, who some of you will know is another innovator in technology who worked for Jimmy at the time. We walked over to his desk and taught Jimmy Iovine for the first time in his life what social media was before we even knew what social media was. We were just simply found this thing. And this is where I think it's important. And it goes to like the super fan thing before. It's not about the buzzword, it's not about all the BS. It's about where is true connection happening and how can you reinforce that true connection.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to like that DIY ethos, right? And community and building a community in the right way. And whether it's, in the music industry or working for an iconic brand, like you drive sustainable growth if you show up every day with integrity and trust and deliver something to the fan or the consumer or whoever that aligns with their values and their purpose, right? And I think like that's why I also feel like the term super fan is kind of gross. It's like if you're doing things the right way, like they're gonna self-select you, they're gonna show up for you, and vice versa. You have to show up for them. But it's all about that mutual relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's no coincidence that the companies that you've worked for, with maybe the exception of Amazon, which didn't work out for them with their whole division anyway, which is a story for another day. But with the exception of that, everything's about community. And you've thrived with them because you're bringing that community ethos, like Vans, especially. And I know you're newer there, and I don't even know that much about what you're doing there yet. But that is a brand that has thrived for their entire history because of community. Like there's
Yeah, I
such an
mean,
identity to that shoe.
yeah, I mean, it people connect with the brand. I think for me, I grew up in loving skateboarding and punk rock. And so Vans like was it for me. And it spoke to me as a consumer. It spoke to who I wanted to be like, what I saw people wearing on stage, what I saw people wearing at the skate park, all those things. And to be able to further that legacy and figure out how to connect the dots between like that teen, 20-year-old consumer today, and what they're into versus like, me as a 46-year-old man, what I'm into, like the fact that the brand can span generations like that is pretty incredible. And I would say like the level of authenticity and care that's gone into staying true to our roots is something that I connected with immediately, especially coming from the worlds that you and I came up from.
No, totally. And it's interesting. I'm forgetting the name of the Netflix TV show, the K-pop like
Oh,
vampire
K-pop
or
Demon
whatever.
Hunters.
K-pop Demon Hunters. Like I just saw that you guys created a shoe for that, and it's brilliant because that's a community. Even though it's massive and mainstream, that is still a community. And like I just when I saw that, I wasn't surprised, even though it's so mainstream, to see you guys doing that. I thought that was such a great concept.
Yeah, and I think like something like K-pop, I mean it's taken the world by storm, especially K-pop Demon Hunters. And it's on repeat all the time in our house and we're huge fans. But to see the way that has resonated with people of all ages has been really exciting and really potent. So to be able to partner with them and Netflix on it has been super cool. And also bring in the next generation of Vans fans and consumers and so on. And it's no different than building an audience for whether it's a tech product or even a band, right? It's about who do you want, who's your demographic, who do you want to go after, and um, making sure that it's not disingenuous in any way, but you're doing things the right way, and that's certainly a big one for us that we're really excited about.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. I saw that and I was like, wow, this is going to get the kids to want to buy these now. And my kids have been wearing Vans since they've been practically born. I think their first shoes were like Vans and Doc Martens because, how do you not do that as a parent coming from our world? but for their friends, that'll be their entry point. So it's
That's
definitely
awesome.
interesting.
I love that. And then,
Yeah.
getting into the tech piece, I mean, fast forwarding to today, music and tech are more intertwined than ever. Like, how do you think about that intersection of music, tech, and community right now? And like, what sort of excites you, and then what concerns you as well?
Yeah, well, I'll start with what doesn't excite me because for, 20 years now, I've seen these companies that pop up and they're like, we're creating a community. We're going to help people discover music. And 100% of the time, when people come to me with these companies, they fail because people forget what community is. And even the ones that succeeded, there's been some really large ones. I think I saw Lou Playas in here from Reverb Nation, and Reverb had a little bit of a community, but all these sites are about community of developing artists to listen to more developing artists to promote themselves to each other. And what excites me with like tech and community around music is creating a community around something else and having technology be the connecting tissue. You look at like Reddit and Discord and these various, communities that are out there. It's always going to be that people go to a community that they find interesting and then start talking about the music that they like. And I think so often people are losing sight of why people, go to these things. And, the other thing is that's frustrating is people aren't looking to discover music like they once were. So you really need to tap into existing communities and win them over versus simply trying to create a music discovery community.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because we look at our daughter Spotify, and like I'm proud of what she listens to, and it's funny to be on the other side of it where now we have some A&R that lives in the house with us in terms of turning us on to new music. But whereas I was just hyper focused on punk when I was in my teens, and that's all I listened to was like punk rock or die. There's some of that on her Spotify, but then it's Billie Eilish, it's Leve, it's Ariana Grande, and it's literally all over the place. And then also some throwback stuff as well. And I think there's a really powerful thing in there where, like, technology has given people, access to more things than ever before, and they're self-selecting what they like or what connects with them, and the lines are a little bit like more blurred than ever before, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, and I think the important thing with technology is it's really about how it can actually help you.
Yeah.
And so many people are trying to force technology where it's not necessary. And I think the key thing is how can we do something new? And like two of the newest companies that I'm advising for, not that I'm trying to shill for them, it's just, gives a point of view. One is this company called Quantizer that's using AI and machine learning to analyze artists' contracts for live performance and then their tour budgets and helping them optimize how they could better run their business through data. And that's interesting. That's trying to fix an actual problem. Does it work or not? Who knows? I believe it can. But to me, that's interesting. And, I'm working with this other company called FanFeed that hasn't even launched yet, but they're ingesting photos from fans' phones and creating a history of every concert they've been to and every sporting event they've been to since they've owned a phone that could take photos. And that allows you to then create a community based on the technology versus just forcing the technology. And both these companies will have various challenges and, problems, but they excite me because they're fixing something that nobody else is working on, first of all, and they're coming at it in different ways. Like obviously everyone's trying to be more efficient financially with tours, but we're coming at it in a different way. And everyone always wants community. There's a million different photo tools, but they're not necessarily in this fashion. And the most interesting thing on the other thing is if people share their photos, you start to know who is actually at events. And one of our biggest challenges on the artist side of the industry, as you know, is ticketing companies never give us the data of who's at the shows. So we need to constantly hack together to find tools to harvest the data of people who are actually at the shows. And a tool like that allows us to begin to understand who's actually inside the show, since Ticketmaster and the other ticketing companies aren't going to share that data with us, which could be a whole other hour-long conversation in itself.
Man, I love that. And I think like thinking anything, whether I'm trying to think of like problems that I've contributed to solving where I've been through my career. But I think when you start with like how does it benefit the end user and does it benefit the end user? And if the answer is yes, then like that is something worth chipping away at. And I think probably like everyone in the chat right now, I've been to more concerts and shows than I could probably count, and I forget a lot of them. And to be able to have something like that that I can look back on and jog my memory aside from scrolling through my iPhone, um, would be super useful. And I also think like on the band side of things, to be able to build that community through that tech and through that data would be really interesting. Because you're right, the first party data just isn't there. And I think
Uh,
that was one of the bigger shifts. Like when I started working for, Hard Rock and then Amazon, which is like the data king,
yeah.
and then even Fender and Vans. Like we rely on that first party data so heavily to inform what people are interested in, what product we're creating, how we're going to market, what messaging is resonating. And it's just so insightful to have that information where, in the music industry, you really don't have that luxury. It's really driven from the creator and pushed out. So to be able to unlock that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and one of the super cool things in this tool, and again, I hate to be selling something, I'm just genuinely excited and fits the conversation, is they're going to have a dashboard where you could look at a dashboard and see the history of the live events. And they showed me a mock-up of this dashboard, and I was like, this is so cool. It was like cooler to me than even seeing the photos, just seeing a visual history of what I've done. And then to, on the flip side, have the data that's in there for teams and artists and venues to visualize that and then use to market back to people. So like those are the things, when you ask what I'm excited about, these are the types of things that I get excited about. It's fixing real problems for ourselves.
That's awesome. I know we have a ton of questions in the chat. I mean, I have like two more for you that I'm genuinely curious about. How about we tackle those and then how about we jump into some questions in the chat? Does that work for you?
Absolutely.
Cool. I mean, one thing that I always think about is, if you were starting out your career today with access to modern tools and platforms, would you do anything differently if starting your career now? And then what skill or mindset do you think matters most for artists, builders, entrepreneurs, etc.?
The biggest thing I would do going back is be more organized. And, some people will laugh because I'm pretty organized to begin with, but I would have embraced technologies to understand and better manage all my contacts. I have, like I go through like my contacts in Gmail and I have over 10,000 contacts and a lot of them, I would say 95% of them are not organized very well. And I would love to have a tool, and I'm sure with AI it'll probably be there very soon, but a tool where I just, I'm like, I'm going to Nashville. Who do I know in Nashville that are working the area that I'm there to work on today? Like something like that, I wish I had. But as far as who I am, how I act, how I present myself, maybe a tiny bit when I was really young to mature a little faster, I would wish I did.
That's
But
everybody.
yeah, no, exactly. That's human. But honestly, I don't know how much I would change. Career wise, there's part of me that says maybe if I worked at a bigger company, it would make me more marketable today because I'd have these large companies on my resume. And I found like in looking for work, everything I've done on paper looks like an unknown nonsense to a lot of larger companies, which, you've gone a different path where you haven't had that challenge. So that sometimes I think about, but at the same time, I really love the path I took. So I don't regret it either.
That's great. I mean, I would say I still do have some of those challenges. They're different, right? And I think I didn't realize that, I had a transferable skill set until I decided to leave artist management. And I kind of think it's about being able to get out of the silo, get out of your own head, take a step back and look objectively of like where you want to be and the skills you've built and where do you want to go. Because I think like using the artist management example, like when you and I were talking about me leaving artist management and the light bulb went off of like, oh yeah, it's the CEO of a band's business. That allows you to go in a million different directions. So for me, it was more about, what excites me. And that's sort of building culture, building community. I found a place where I could work with these iconic brands, but the unlock is how do I make them culturally relevant for now? Or how do I help, introduce that relevance for now to take them the next 50, 60, 70 years, and be a part of that story. But I think it's being laser focused on what the narrative is and what you want to lean into versus it just being a little bit loose. Because, I'd like to believe that, anyone that comes from the worlds we came from, it's a matter of just focus and discipline and then being open to possibilities when a different door opens, but always being curious and learning. And that certainly helped me throughout the process.
Yeah, didn't you mention to me a while back that like when you were first looking to leave management that a recruiter from Apple happened to reach out to you who was a fan and just
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I mean that
highlighted for
that's
you?
That's what, and I'm still friends with him. And he's still at Apple. But yeah, he reached out to me about an opportunity with iTunes Festival in the US when they were looking to bring it to the US. And the job ended up not working out, but it was my first time going through a corporate interview process. And in like, having those conversations, it really allowed me to take a step back and be like, oh shit, like doing what I do is totally transferable to a major company that I love that's doing things unique and different. And I think ultimately that's what gave me the confidence to pursue other opportunities. And the next one I pursued was, a role at Hard Rock, which was, it was director of marketing and entertainment for their hotel and casino portfolio. So 22 hotels in 11 countries. And, moved from New York to Orlando and it was my first quote unquote corporate job. But coming in, um, you know, with my mind wide open, with my eyes wide open, and learning as much as I possibly could, it was awesome. I mean, it was a great 3.5 years where, I can then look and see the skill set I built in artist management or in the band that directly translate it to how are we going to get this, hotel company to connect with consumers and what can we do to make, their lives better, their vacations better, their trips better, et cetera, and deliver value. So for me, like it all points back to sort of that ethos. But it wasn't until that conversation with that recruiter that I had realized that I really had built a transferable skill set, which was cool.
That's awesome.
Before we jump to the questions, I mean, what's one thing you wish people in music or culture broadly paid more attention to right now?
Yeah, I think as a whole, I think it really still goes to community. As crazy as it sounds, I think it's paid lip service more so than it's really believed. It becomes, like the super fan focus that we're talking about lately. It's like we gotta focus on the super fan. They're worth X number of dollars per fan. We need to stop thinking of fans as a dollar sign and more think of how you can maintain a community. And like I'll touching on another area that's been really important to me is fighting ticket scalping, as anyone knows who follows me. And, to a fault, I describe to some people that it's my mental illness. But equating this to scalping, one of the things that I talk about all the time is if scalpers could just buy up and have access to all these tickets and sell them for whatever they want, we destroy the concept of lifetime value as a fan because only the rich can see a show. So everything I do becomes about community. My fight against scalpers is because people are charging $1,000 to see a show that may have been a $60 ticket. And that $60 ticket, an 18-year-old kid may be able to pay for and go to the show. But when it's $1,000, they don't go and they move on and they find something else that they're passionate about. And we've lost that fan forever. And that 50-year-old who has the money, who's going to the show because they heard about it on TikTok. They go to it once and they don't come back again because they follow the next trend. So that is just so incredibly important to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well said.
Yeah. So we dive into some questions in our last 15 minutes.
Let's dive into some questions. And I just saw someone commented, Jordan Kuhn, Matt, I was randomly in your first Best of Me music video at the arcade in Valencia. I live
Wow.
in Valencia and didn't even realize we shot that music video there. So that is really funny. So thanks, Jordan.
I remember where it was because I helped book it. And we had, by the way, to go like full circle here in this conversation, Vince Pileggi, who managed the band Real Big Fish, was a lead character in that music video. And he danced on that game Dance Dance Revolution that was popular many years ago in the arcade. And he danced on that throughout the video as we had a narrative story. And that ended up the video ended up, I think it leaked online eventually, but it was a terrible music video. And then we shot the iconic Best of Me video with Jeff Gordon, which went on to be on MTV2 every 30 seconds and couldn't have been happier with the final product.
Man, there's a good question from Brian Kim in here. Randy, what are other ways to get fan data from ticket buyers that Ticketmaster holds? I was surprised how well set list activations work. Anyone have any other good incentives for fans at a show to give their first party to the artist?
Yeah, barcodes at shows, not barcodes, QR codes at shows has become a big one. And there's a few different companies doing it. My friend Andrew Smith from Swapped is doing this. He has another, I think his company's called Torwave, in addition to Swapped for his live music tools. But there's tools like that, capturing QR codes to, do giveaways at shows. That's been the key thing I've seen. It's a constant challenge, and I don't have a lot of answers, which is why I'm getting involved with this company, FanFeed, for that reason.
That's awesome. There's Ryan Gill asked a question in here pertaining to Vans, and it's how different is the playbook that we use for marketing Vans versus what it was when I was coming up, and are they still promoting to the skate parks and scene kids? Is that audience still as big? It's a great question. I mean, coming in, I think quickly realizing what made Vans special, and it goes back to the community thing that we keep talking about. It's Vans is a subculture brand, right? And there's ebbs and flows within certain subcultures and communities. I would say, skating sometimes is growing, sometimes it's shrinking, but it's still a differentiator and it's still a core part of who Vans is. Same thing with music and same thing with fashion and lifestyle. So I would say at any given time, there's expansion, there's contraction. But I think it's important that sort of those elements that made us who we are pulled through in everything we do. But also, we're a global brand that has to grow, right? And it's making sure we have products that connect to consumers at scale, but also the quote unquote super fan term that we all don't love, but I would say like the high lifetime value consumer, the people who are buying Vans over and over again, we're giving them a reason to believe, we're giving them a reason to come back with differentiated product, with things they really connect to. So I wouldn't say there's a playbook that existed from, decades ago that we're using now. It's all about looking at who the consumer is today, who we want to bring into our ecosystem or re-engage, and then making sure we're doing right by them.
Yeah, so Mike Green had a question that he actually emailed earlier that I just wanted to throw out there. And we touched on this, but did it seem like you were an outsider when you tried to cross over to more, non-music jobs? And was there anything specific you did to present yourself as less of an outsider to that world?
That's a great question. And hi, Mike. Yeah, I mean, I think, the fortuitous call I got from that recruiter at Apple sort of gave me the confidence to walk in to other conversations and really look at what I did in management or in music and to be able to frame that in a way that people would connect with and understand how it applied to their business. So I think it's a matter of like what's that story you want to weave. And I think like if you're at a major label or an artist services company, like there's so many things that you're doing on the day to day, whether it's, working with talent or bringing products to market, or audience growth and development that you can see how they would be valuable to a company wherever you want to go to. I think those are all really sort of transferable skills. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's about developing the right narrative and figuring out how they can understand it because a lot of industries, hire from within. I think the music industry is definitely guilty of that in some way, shape, and form. But I think like people want those silos broken down. Sometimes they just don't know how. So I think you have to help them help themselves. Interestingly enough, like I've over the years I've interviewed with a couple major labels for marketing jobs, marketing leadership roles, and I found a tough time being able to translate what I do or what I've done at Fender or Amazon or Hard Rock and how that would apply to a music company. So Mike, I have it from the opposite end of the spectrum. I think it's creating the narrative of, at the end of the day, we have values that we believe in. We're passionate about what we do, taking products to market, working with talent, building culture and building community, and coming up with the right throughput to get from point A to point B. Hopefully that answered
Nice.
it.
But no, that I think that probably does. By the way, I wanted to throw one thing out there. We had a bunch of notes of things we were going to talk about, and one thing you were going to ask me about was reframing problems as opportunities. And I wanted to touch on that quickly because I was having a conversation yesterday with my friend Sanaz, who manages an artist named Chatter, who's I think in the chat also. And she's talking to a couple of record companies who are excited to sign this artist. And she was asking for advice about different companies. And one of the things that I told her is the people that you trust that are going to tell you no when you can't do that, they won't let you do something, are people that you want to align with more so than so often. We found it with Starting Line a lot where people would just not give you an answer rather than say no. And, sometimes getting a no is the greatest opportunity. And it reminds me, actually, as I'm saying this, it reminds me of a story with with the Starting Line years ago when we wanted to do a music video for what the hell it was for Leaving, I think. And the record company wouldn't give us a budget. We found that promotion with Mountain Dew through whatever company. I think it was Mountain Dew. Remember we won that
Yeah.
$50,000 contest to get a music video. And we were competing against a bunch of bands that were much bigger than us in this contest. But it was like, we got to know they can't do the music video. I was like, all right, I'm going to engage all this online marketing that almost no one was using at that point, which then allowed us to beat a bunch of bigger bands. So I just wanted to throw out there that like sometimes looking for the no is the best thing you can do versus fighting for the yes.
I think that's a really good point. And one thing that we also didn't touch on, which we probably should, because I think there's an interesting sort of through line here, and to the people who are on, like A, thanks for joining, and B, hopefully there's a good takeaway in here for all of you guys. But you wouldn't know it by I would say like the mutual respect Randy and I have for each other, but we stopped working together in terms of band and manager probably about a year and a half ago and after working together for over 2 decades. And Randy, I know that that was like a conversation that we had well above board and overly communicative, but like would love if you could speak to that a little bit because I think it's interesting for people to know like, hey, like just because you're ending sort of one chapter with somebody, it doesn't mean that that relationship can't continue, or it doesn't mean there's any ill will or anyone did anything wrong.
It- I've got to say, first of all, man, we work so well together, even though we haven't talked in months. I literally was about to say we need to touch on this before we end this call. So, I'll make a long story much shorter, but I love managing the starting line, love my relationship with every person in the band. I felt like after a while, I got too close to the band and I became like a band member rather than a manager. And when there are disagreements in the band, I was like part of one sect in the band rather than a trusted advisor. And there was one specific moment that happened on a call where Matt may see this differently. I don't know. We don't need to dig into specifics. But I felt like Matt aligned with one of the band members rather than what I believe was the truth. And rather than be angry at Matt, at the time, I sent him a screenshot of what I believed he said. And after the call, we got on a call. I was like, it's time. I think it's time for me to step aside because I can't run this business and I respect our friendship too much to let it get in the way of that. And he and I then we didn't even go to the band immediately. I just said it to him like this needs to happen soon. And we began working on a plan. And there was one band member in the band that we felt wouldn't listen to me, and I couldn't be a guide if they weren't going to listen to me. And this band member, I still have nothing but love for. It's not a personal thing. It's just he didn't trust my vision, and that happens. A board of directors loses trust in a CEO. It doesn't mean that they hate the CEO. There's just a change of trust, and Matt and I put together a list of new managers. I reached out to multiple of those potential new managers to say, I think you might be good for this band. And we worked together to help replace me. And there was never a day of ill will between any of us. And we decided that the end of the year would be my last show as their manager. Went to the last show that they played in the year, like the end of December, and me and the majority of the band, and the one member just left early for whatever reason, but me and the rest of us were the last people in the venue, and we all walked out of the venue together, the last people to leave as they locked the door. And it's just like it felt like a movie ending exactly as it should end. And like it was hard to walk away from managing a band that I loved for that many years, but I believe in the band and the people more so than I need the extra couple of $1,000s a year that I'm making as the manager and to feel that I'm important managing one of my favorite bands. So it's just, I can't thank Matt and the rest of those guys enough to have had me around for that many years and to allow our ending to just be so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, what a journey. And I think it certainly taught me a lot about resilience and also like having those healthy checkpoints with yourself throughout your career of, okay, do I feel good about where I'm going? Because we all invest a lot of time into what we're doing, and everyone should feel like they're on the right journey, they're learning, they're growing, etc. But for me, that was a real realization of like, hey, like Randy, let's have the open conversation. Like, do we feel good about this? Do we not feel good about this? And I think addressing those things head on and to do it in a way that, with trust and integrity and openness, man, like to me, like it was sort of a masterclass to some degree. And it's something that I'll carry with me throughout my career for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think one of the important takeaways from that situation and just to anyone in the industry is if you don't lead with money and you lead with passion and what's the right thing to do, the rest of it will typically work out in the end. And I've never made any decisions for my artists based on money. So losing the money that I was making wasn't a hard thing. I mean, financially, it could be at some point. And as Jillian jokes in here, it's like, when doesn't Randy need a job newsletter start? And, I'm going to need to look for a job in the next year potentially if some of my consulting things don't work out because I went through the same thing that I went through with you guys with Under Oath, except they fired me. But again, a mutual respect. My next call after this call is going to be with Kim from Under Oath. Like, it's just, it doesn't have to be this terrible thing, but like, you do the right thing. The community looks after each other. I think that speaks to how many people in the room listening to both of us right now.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of familiar faces in the chat, which is so awesome to see. So if I haven't connected with some of you, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or DM me on the gram. Would love to reconnect with a lot of you guys.
Yeah, same here. And by the way, I want to answer Larry's question that I see. Ask if money was no object, what business would we create to help musicians in the music business? And I have no idea. And if I did, I would build it and not worry about the money first and just start building it first. But it's a great question. Just had
It
to
is a
touch
great
on that.
question.
And to everyone else's questions I missed, I apologize. I'm trying to be present here too.
Well, boys, I'm afraid we're about out of time, but holy smokes, what a great start to 2026 this has been for all the participants. Thank you for doing this, Randy. It was such a pleasure to meet you in Aspen recently. And by the way, Matt, when I started describing to Randy what this was and why I wanted him on and who he wanted to invite as a guest, he goes, "Oh, I got it. I know who it is right now. Matt Watts, hard stop, mic drop." He was right. Fantastic conversation today, boys.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
us, Tom. This was awesome.
To the audience, I promised you'd leave smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Done. And folks, we hope to see you back here in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, be nice to each other. The world could use a lot of that right now. Y'all take care. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.